One. All right, well, good evening, everyone. I call the May 9th meeting of the Strategic Plan Update Task Force to order. Apologies for interrupting the great conversation, but the sooner we start, the sooner we can end and try to enjoy the evening even more. So tonight we have currently have 9 regular task force members and 3 alternates present. So in terms of excused absences, we have Council Member Martz and alternate TJ Ginther. So they have excused absences, and we have Council Member Hunt joining. And then let's see, so Council President Lindsay Walsh will be serving in place of Council Member Martz, and then Council Member Hunt will continue to act in her full capacity. So the role of the remaining alternates in the room today they'll continue to serve as alternates this evening. We encourage everyone's full participation in the informal discussion. Any participation in motions, debate, or voting will be limited to regular members. And with that, let us move to approval of minutes.
Public comment.
We're on order on the agenda. Okay, so do
it is.
Yeah.
Let's just follow the agenda. I don't know where that's in there, but.
Okay. All right. So can we get a motion to approve the minutes?
We'll approve the minutes.
Okay. We got a second? Okay. I'll give folks a moment to quickly skim and see if there's any discussion or clarifications needed. All right, is any further discussion needed? Okay. Hearing none. Read that on those?
We do not need to.
We don't need to.
No.
Okay, well then I think we have passed the minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to public comments. It looks like we may have a member of the public joining us virtually who may give public comment. Let's see, if anyone would like to give comment, can you raise your hand icon? And we do have a hand raised. Let's see. So just in terms of quick guidelines for public comments, please direct your comments to the whole board or commission and not individuals. And while this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. So when you're recognized, please state your name, address, and relationship to the city, and speak clearly and pause frequently, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes. And with that, I'd like to invite Steve Pereira to give public comment.
Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself to make public comment. Steve, can you hear us?
You may be muted.
Okay, I think I've unmuted myself now. Can everyone hear me okay?
I'm going to turn you up a little bit, Steve, but you're good on your end.
Okay, so my name is Steve Pereira. I lived in Issaquah, Old Town neighborhood for about 16 years. First thing I wanted to say was just thank you all for serving in this capacity. I think it's great that and wonderful. Not all jurisdictions have public boards and commissions, and so I wanted to thank you for taking the time to be involved in your city, try to make a contribution, make a difference. So just wanted to encourage you all to take that role seriously. Don't just follow a planned agenda that the city presents, but voice your thoughts, voice your concerns, voice your ability to be a minority view or a different view or take on the commission role in which you serve. So thank you all. That said, jumping into the meat, when I first listened to this commission or this meeting, what I heard the city administration say that strategic vision was kind of what things was aspirational, what things might be left off. And I think a flaw or a problem with this strategic plan was that it tries too hard and it's too broad, tries to be too many things to too many people. It needs to be narrowed down to just those things that are aspirational. It probably shouldn't have 11 different strategic operational plans feed into it, because that's not an operational plan. It's not an operational plan. It's a strategic aspirational plan. So I think of things like public safety are not aspirational goals. I think things like transportation, public mobility are not aspirational goals. Last time I looked, for example, at the transportation improvement plan, it was $167 million worth of goals or projects that we were probably never going to be able to get to because the funding just does not exist. I'm assuming that I might be wrong, that it's probably increased in value over the time. So that's an example of something that seems too broad. I'm not sure that leadership is something that fits in with that as well. And I'm, again, just presenting these as examples, not trying to kill any particular ideas or projects. Just I'm encouraging us to kind of narrow the scope of what the things are in the strategic plan. I think of things like ICAP, for example, as a great thing, and the city has put a lot of city resources, but I would like us to look at the idea of what can we do with legislation policy to better account for improvements and have tighter building code, rather than look at ICAP as a funding source. What can we do from a legislative or policy position to have tighter code that would get us more effective outcomes of who we are and where we want to go, than look just at budget. Things I probably shouldn't look at, for example, I shouldn't look at this as a project by project or item by item list. For example, I've never been a fan of the dog park, but I think that's an example of a project by project item that I probably shouldn't speak about in this group. I am a big fan of culturally modified trees, which are trees that are modified by First Peoples, such as Squamish, as trail marking and wayfinding ways. I think those should be legally protected, but again, that's kind of a project by project item, so I will leave that out. I would like to talk about, for example, things that should be included are recently the city of Issaquah redid its Title 18, and a number of items were included in a whiteboard listing, and I have not seen that whiteboard listing, but I would like to see how that or those items from Title 18 can be included or added to things that the city keeps and tracks and maybe looks at strategic plan as far as being a goal, and how we incorporate or include those things. That's kind of the gist of my thoughts. Again, just kind of looking at what the broader scope is and whether or not we're too broad, and what are the things we really aspire or want to do or see accomplished. We just can't, things like this can't just be a wish list of who we want to do or we plug in. I guess another example of transportation mobility project is, I think, again, looking at transportation projects, city recently increased its funding for that, but I don't think we're ever going to get through that list. It seems unfeasible to say we're ever going to have enough funds for a transportation improvement plan. I would like us to say focus less money on road projects, which might not be popular or favorite, but we need to get out of the single culture code of one car, one single occupant vehicle, and look at doing more for mass transit. Not so much mass transit, but less in your roads to make people get out of their single vehicle. Because until we get out of that, we're never going to look at the greenhouse gas emissions and the point of pollution sales creation to drive down the things we really need to do to become those. That's an aspirational goal, to become less car centric, and that's something that would drive that change and improvement immensely. That's kind of my thoughts. I want to again thank you for your time and wish you luck, and please advocate strongly for what you believe, and hope that continues. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Ferreira. We appreciate your attendance at the meeting today. Okay, so, and I don't believe there's any more public comments, so we can move on to the next agenda item, which is our kind of our opening question and how we will engage with each other. And so you can see on the screen, we have our meeting norms, which are to lean into discomfort, take space and share space, be open, authentic, and honest, be curious, recognize that everyone has their own identities, histories, and perspectives, center the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, treat what happens in our small group conversations, if possible, with confidentiality. But however, we know this is a public meeting and is recorded. And then also consider equality of voice. And then we started a practice, I think, a couple of meetings ago, where you can tip your tent up when you would like to speak, and that way we can try to call on everyone in turn to allow everyone to make their comments. Okay, and with that, we're going to move into our icebreaker question, just to get everyone's voices into the space. And so just, take maybe 30 seconds. You do just about every day that often goes unnoticed. And we could probably have whoever wants to kick it off, and then we'll just go around. Yeah.
Noticed by anybody, everybody?
With this question?
Yeah.
But it's open. However you want to define it. Yeah. Would you like to go first, Randy?
Oh. Yeah, I guess the one thing that I do that it goes unnoticed because it's private is I just find myself thinking very often, several times a day. Unfortunately, that's it.
Maybe let's go the opposite way. Katie. Mixing it up.
One thing that you do every day that often goes unnoticed. I pick up a lot of random socks, and I have an almost 4-year-old and a 5.5-year-old. So I pick up a lot of random things. I put toothpaste on toothbrushes that they probably just think divinely gets there. But yeah, okay, that's like also picking up random small things.
Happy Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you.
I also have the household chore task that I think gets unnoticed, which would be loading the dishwasher. I think my family believes that the dishes magically move from the sink into the dishwasher.
I'm in my house. I am the light turn offer. I feel very fortunate that I think my husband notices a lot of the other things that I do, but that one in particular, I'm not sure that he ever really thinks about the lights being turned off, but they are all turned off all the time.
Let's see, not a home one because I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I would say work-wise, I get there first, but then I'm the same. It's like I make sure all the drawers are unlocked and everything. I think the team thinks they're automatically done, even though we lock them every night before we go home with all the confidentiality stuff. So just unlocking the drawers and having it all done. When they come in there, I go, it's like we were working already. So magically, even though they locked them the night before.
I think like Lindsay and Katie, I've got a home chore. I often call myself the laundry elf because everyone's clothes just are miraculously folded in nice little stacks for people to put away, and no one ever knows how it gets done.
Can't really think of anything really unique apart from what's already said.
Yeah, I also am like, honestly, in my household, my partner is one who I gotta say, like reverse gender roles as far as household chores goes. I'm very much embodying, the not too much of it. But I would say the one chore that he absolutely never does is make the bed. And he does do it. I mean, he doesn't like notice, but like when he makes it, I'm like, you did such a bad job. Like, and I'm naked. And like, maybe this is going on too long, but I feel like he's okay with like doing things like 80% of the way. I'm gonna do it right. And I think that's why that's like the threshold that I have to get over to like, do things that like.
That's why you're on this task force.
Yeah, like we need to move back.
I would say leave the house. I start my day at 4:30, get ready to leave. And I usually leave around 5:15 or so. So usually me just creeping out.
For myself, being in a small family company, I wear a lot of different hats, and one of them is sales. And I don't think people realize, at least my company doesn't realize, just how many phone calls and emails it takes to cinch a deal. My father and our office manager kind of thinks these conversations happen in a vacuum. Like, wow, it's great. I was like, well, that took like 10 emails. And you guys all give me jazz about writing novels, but it's an important part of sales. So I'd say that.
Two things, I guess. For one thing is family means everything to me. So one of the things that I do every day is I'm always searching for a way to get us all together. Baseball game, a picnic, family outing, whatever. And then for me, I still get the paper. So when I get up in the morning, I always walk across the grass. And it's just that feeling of being part of that moment. And that's walking across the grass, whether it's wet or dry or whatever, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah, this is a challenge for me because my wife and kids really appreciate it. We never all of these things like but I think there's an element of planning that kind of goes make sure that transition between the activities is going to happen. It's responsible, and that we have something right to do as a family. Those days, we are.
For me, I have a really old house, and there's constantly little things going wrong in it, and so it's maybe not quite daily, but definitely multiple times a week. There's little things that have to be fixed, and sometimes it's noticed because I'm getting told that this needs to get fixed. Other times there's just little things that keeping the house running properly, all the things working. It's a little harder than a newer house.
I love hearing from my kids like, "Oh, that started working." Oh, fantastic! It's everything. Yeah.
I'd like to.
I want to. Here we are in the back here. For me, I don't think that anybody don't have to table on talk in the morning. So I probably have worn down the sidewalk because you might not be all I got. But needed to eat. I pick up litter when I'm walking. I take close-up off the ground. If I'm not vehicle. I see people walking their kids to school. My friends are walking their dogs. It's like a whole. That's kind of a town that I get every morning and every afternoon. And I love it. It needs to know what we're talking about.
No, and the dry cleaning naturally goes from the floor to the closet.
Wow. You're 15 years. I like it.
I'm very fine.
Thanks. Then we have Councilmember Hunt on virtually.
Yes, thanks. So I, for my day job, I am the system administrator for a lot of our databases, and I work with a lot of really talented software engineers and researchers. And I sort of think of it as my job to make sure that it's that they have the tools and systems in place. And so I kind of want all of that to go unnoticed and just kind of work for them.
Well, thank you all for the opening question. And now I'm going to pass it over to Dale.
Sorry.
Yes.
Something that went unnoticed, because I wasn't here for the last meeting, but I wanted to make sure that we noticed it again. Our own little Wally got since on April 19th, I believe it was, got the National Public Service Award for outstanding public service. And I can just tell you, I don't know if it's good, because that is an outstanding honor for our community, and I appreciate all work. Okay, sorry.
Yep. Okay. Now over to Dale to kick off the meeting framing.
Great. Gosh, it's good to be back in this room with you all. It feels like it's been a true age. I've been halfway around the world and back, so I'm excited to be back here at home with you all. Our agenda for this evening, we're going to talk a little bit at the top end of the meeting just about aligning actions to the objectives that we started to brainstorm together at our last meeting on April 4th. And then the bulk of our time is going to be spent back in our breakout groups working on doing just that, aligning actions to those objectives. And the real hope coming out of this evening is that you have, I'm going to call it a first final draft of what your objectives and prioritized actions within each goal area should be. So that's how we're going to spend our time together tonight. We're going to get some time with our groups to brainstorm. Then I'm going to, as is always fun, inject a little extra layer into that brainstorm about 35 minutes into it. Then you'll have a little bit more time with your groups, and then we'll engage in some feedback for each other before closing out for the evening. A reminder again of our objectives as a task force. You're here to provide the council and the administration with an updated Issaquah strategic plan set of objectives and actions, and to make a recommendation about further engagement around this plan update. Our last meeting, as I mentioned, we spent in our objectives. This, our fourth of 5 meetings, is on aligning and prioritizing actions to set us up to make a final recommendation at our next meeting in just under 2 weeks. So tonight, finalizing objectives, discussing and workshopping recommended potential actions aligned to those objectives to set us up for May 22nd, where we will finalize our recommendations. So how are we going to do that? We return to this journey. This picture I didn't know was going to be as real to my experience in Scotland as it ended up being, but for the new, or not maybe the new faces, but the faces that haven't been in the room the last couple of meetings, at our last meeting when we talked about objectives, I provided an example of a family trip, Markey is my maiden name, a Markey family trip to Scotland, one that was truly coming up in just a couple of weeks following our meeting. And so in the realm of a true strategic plan lover that I am, I took my family vacation, and to make objectives a little bit more real and a little bit more tangible, gave you an example of what the Markey family vacation would look like, planned through the lens of our strategic plan, with a high-level goal, with 4 goal areas, with measurable objectives within each of those goal areas, and some aligned, prioritized actions that I thought would get us to our goals. My family did not love this plan. Turns out, too bad for them. I'm talking about them again in a recorded public meeting. But what we focused on last time really was the objective piece. We focused on strategic objectives that can tell us how much of something we are going to do and by when we are going to do it. And we really focused on that because one of the reflections on our original strategic plan was that a lot of our objectives lacked either the how much or the by when, and in some cases, a little bit of both.
So although we might have said, this is generally a 5-year plan, the scope was varied depending on the goal area. And so one of the things that we did when we were together last time was really trying to narrow that scope and say how much we're going to do by when we're going to do it. Today, our task is really to focus on this prioritized aligned actions piece. So the what? What are we going to do towards the end of our objectives? So you can see some of the actions that I thought of ahead of time that my family was so excited about when I brought to them, aligned to the goal areas of connection, adventure, learning and culture, and rejuvenation. So I wanted to show you an example and actually take the goal area, the proposed objectives and measurement and prioritized actions and move them into a matrix, which we'll use a matrix shape tonight to try to really make sure our actions are aligned to our objectives and we've thought about measurement for each thing. So I wanted to build this out a little bit for you. So the goal area adventure, the goal, Clan Macrimp, which, my family is Scotch-Irish on the McCord side, but my husband joked when we got married that we should align our names into Macrimp, which I did not say yes to, but we did make a joke throughout this vacation that we could be our own clan if we had done that. That we had tried new things, experienced the thrill and adventure on the Scottish trip, the proposed objectives. Each family member has tried something new. So each person, how much, by when, implied here at the end of our trip. Each family member has stepped outside of their normal routine. Each family member has experienced something that elevated their heart rate. Again, these are more simple than the objectives you've come up with, but I want to, again, provide a more simple example. Proposed measurement, we talked about that last time as well. So in this case, for 2 of those things, a little participant survey. Did not make my family fill out a Google form, but we did do a survey on the last night together. And I did take my Garmin watch to monitor my own heart rate throughout this experience, which was fascinating. And then you see next to that, those prioritized aligned actions. This is from my original plan: eat haggis, listen to traditional music, have each member of the group plan a different day. We thought that would help everyone step outside their normal routine. And then in terms of elevated heart rate, the Korang hike on the Isle of Skye and a mountain bike tour. We learned some things on this trip, and as I discussed this action plan, and as I sent the recorded meeting to my family to have them watch ahead of our last family meeting, things we learned. Threshold for adventure was different for everyone on this trip. We also learned that the expectation that we would spend and that someone would plan an entire day, that was also maybe an expectation that wasn't appropriate for every member of the family. And that driving on the left-hand side of the road was truly terrifying enough to raise many people's heart rates. That was adventure in itself. So you can see here that we made some changes to our prioritized actions. Now you might ask, Dale, why are you sharing so much of your family vacation with us? I think it's really important to note that for some of these objectives from the original plan, you're just going to get rid of them. But some of them you are going to keep around. And so part of tonight's activity is to think about the prioritized aligned actions that are next to that objective from the original plan. What changes need to be made to those actions? You may not want to throw them all out. So in some cases, you'll have brand new objectives that you're thinking of the original actions for. And in some cases, you're keeping objectives and thinking about how the actions need to change. I share all this to also share, we had a lovely time. Scotland was wonderful. I'm happy off the public meeting to talk at any point about it. But this was, everyone smiled throughout the trip. I came back more rested. I did not need a second vacation. And my heart rate was actually, believe it or not, lower resting heart rate at the end of this trip than at the beginning of this trip. Fascinating takeaway. So your task tonight is to work on aligning actions to your objectives. A couple things to keep in mind. As you go about this, I'm going to invite you to revisit your draft objectives from the April 5th, the April 4th meeting, brainstorm new actions, and then align those actions to your objectives. I would invite you to start by considering the functional plans that we looked into earlier in this process. I've also printed out copies in there. All your materials are still with you at your tables. You had some actions. Some groups actually had actions that you came up with at the last meeting. Those bike racked actions are at your table again. And for the 2 groups that sent me your objectives ahead of time already, those are also at your table again. So consider what's in the functional plans and then consider what's not. What's missing? The reason that there's a strategic plan is that we acknowledge there are things that don't exist in functional plans that still need to be prioritized as part of our strategic approach to the work we're doing. The other things to consider are the same things we considered around the objectives. What's changed since 2018 and 2019? What's planned or already underway that applies to your objectives? And how do the strategic plan values shape your actions? A little preview, we're going to pause and think about those values a little bit more in about 40 minutes. And so we'll come back to that and add that layer in a little bit. Before we transition into our breakout groups, though, any questions? And I would invite a name, tent, tip to indicate. I will be moving around. I also need to set up Councilmember Hunt's breakout room to be with our mobility and infrastructure group. And so we'll do that technical piece here in a moment. But questions, go full.
Yeah, so we're getting to the end of the series. We should think about like optimizing the outcome. Meetings, part of that's going to be really understanding your strat. Take it away from here. Any thoughts on like who we should be writing for?
Yes, you maybe scrolled to the end of my PowerPoint, but maybe not. On either July 15th or 16th, the date is still a little bit in the air given council's other commitments. Members, representatives from this group will all be invited to make a presentation to City Council with your recommendations. We'll talk more about who's available then. You know, ideally we'd have as many of you there as possible. But that will be your first audience, but the administration is also your audience. So the administration is going to need to, at some point, take this, and we'll talk at our next meeting. One of our tasks I'm anticipating will be to think of the criteria through which you would like the administration to consider your recommendations. So feasibility, affordability, like what you'll come up with that criteria, set of criteria, but that will be part of our meeting, our next meeting as well. Great question, Adam. Amy.
Yeah, my question is sort of similar, but I mean, I guess I appreciate what we're doing here, and I do think that it's a little bit challenging in 5 meetings for us to get into every single item that in every action, every objective. So I'm curious if there's any space that we will have next meeting for like the overarching priorities. Like I know when we did Capital Finance Task Force, there was like the outcome was not like a super detailed plan. It was, we're going to have an overarching recommendation, what we should do. And so I'm trying to, is there anything that we're as a group going to come together other than kind of a long list and of kind of objectives and actions and the kind of engagement next steps? That's part of what I would love to talk about, because I think it's going to be hard for us, in my personal opinion, is like all of the boards and commissions and council members like are all going to need to have feedback on the details of actions. And so having this group together is a unique opportunity to provide some like higher level feedback to a different group of people. So just curious if that's on the agenda or that, or if we're going to be still focused on kind of just the objectives and actions down below.
My hope is that we use today to, when I said first final, I'd like us to be very close to a final draft of those more objectives actions, because I'd like I'm hoping the majority of our next meeting will be about crafting our message and communication to the decision makers. Yeah. Vice President Walsh.
When you talk about the strategic plan values, do you mean the guiding principles?
I do.
Fantastic. But I know exactly what to look for. Thank you.
Okay. Well, to maximize our time, I'd like us to transition into our groups. They should be of no surprise to you. Mobility and infrastructure group, I will meet you in a moment because we will need to use one person's computer to facilitate a breakout room for Councilmember Hunt to join you. Right, I'll set a timer and expect an update from me in about 40 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Nothing like a best laid plan totally derailed. And so, you know, I think the time was well spent in your groups, digging into the messy work of trying to figure out, like, what are the objectives you think should be the priorities for the administration over the next 5 years, and what are the actions that align to that. Two things. One that I already mentioned to at least a couple of groups, but I'll say in the full group. We, in observing where we are currently and thinking what might we need, we're going to add an optional 6th meeting for this group, probably in late June. We have to look at some calendars and make sure people are available for the purpose of allowing the administration to see your recommendations and come back to you and share their understanding, takeaway, expertise, the filter through which ultimately this will go before this group presents their recommendations to council. And so hopefully that'll help you feel like your work is getting contextualized, and you're maybe not just, I could sense from a couple of groups tonight, it was just like, oh, we're throwing stuff at the wall and I don't know if any of this makes sense or matters at all. And we want to make sure that we close that loop with you, because the work you're doing, the way you're thinking does matter. It is essential to what's happening, and to this update being a successful update and reflecting the changes that have happened in the community and the perspectives of our community members. So more details on that. There's no date yet pinned down, but I'll reach out in a follow-up email with potential dates. Okay. I mentioned earlier, July 15th or 16th, council presentation. We'll also follow up with some details about that. When we come back together, because we did not get to the point of feedback, so you worked in your bubbles and no one else saw your draft. When we're back together on the 22nd, that is when we'll get a chance to give each other input and feedback. And it's also when we'll take this next step of looking at your recommendations and then looking at the original plan and saying, okay, what's different? Okay. And what are the priorities, really? What's the change that we're really asking the administration and the council to consider here? We also didn't get to the guiding principles today. We simply didn't have time to get there. And I think that's an important lens that we're going to need to take when we think about not just what, but how should the administration pursue this work. As President.
Okay. Would it be possible to have each of the groups take their notes, type them up into that chart and send it to you, and then send it out to the community?
I was going to say, if you have legible writing, this is just fine. If your writing is hard to read, okay, we can talk. And then I know the group in the back corner has already typed theirs up. So yes, the plan will be for me to get all this into a document so it can be read ahead of time. You're not going to come in cold to our upcoming meeting. Okay. Right. Victor.
Yeah. Is there the possibility of adding another meeting? Because I mean, you just said there's a lot of things we didn't get to today, and we feel that we just scratched the surface on what we were doing as well. And we didn't get to do the guiding principles. We didn't get to do the rounds. We had a couple of discussions on things that we should probably bring to other groups because they're probably better suited to action on those things. And I feel like we're missing an opportunity if we don't. So that's my question.
That's a great question. Let's see where we get at the end of our next meeting with already knowing that we're going to be adding a late June meeting. Given the role of the strategic plan update in the budget process, we're starting to we're going to start hitting up against a deadline most likely. But I do think in terms of what does an ongoing community engagement look like after this group is finished with their work, that what you're saying might play into those recommendations too. Great. Okay. I will cede my negative time back to the chair.
Great. So just wanting to check if anyone has other business or announcements for the group.
Okay.
All right. Okay, then I think with that, we can adjourn this meeting of the Strategic Plan Task Force at 8:33 p.m. And our next meeting is May 22nd from 8 to 8:30 here. And thank you all for the lively engagement tonight.
Awesome.
Yeah.